Hello, this is Benjamin Price reporting for Kids First, and today I'll be interviewing Troy Quane and Nick Bruno, the directors of the new film Spies in Disguise. So you two collectively have been a part of a large range of animated films, from Arthur Christmas to the Peanuts movie. I'm curious, which one of those projects was most seminal in preparing you for directing a feature-length film?
That's a great question.
Oh man, you did hit us hard with the first question.
Do you have an answer?
I do. No, for me, it was working on the Peanuts movie, because I was in charge of animation at the time. But you were taking a beloved classic and trying to translate that into a 3D medium. But the biggest things I learned was really doing your research, really making sure that you're paying attention to all the details out there. And then it was such even though it looks very simple, the movie, it was very complex technically. So learned a lot about collaboration and working with people to solve problems. And having done that, working with different departments and stuff, I felt like I got a better understanding of how to approach making a bigger film. And that was really, you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be surrounded by really good people, and they'll figure everything out.
Great answer. What can I add to that? For me, it was Enchanted. It was a live action and animation movie. Yeah. I got to work with one of my best friends and mentor, Kevin Lima, who's the director of that movie. And I was part of the story process right from the beginning. So I got to see the challenges in the writing of the material and how to develop the characters and the world, and how to craft the cuts and the camera work that was required. But also the same as Nick, how all the different departments, from costuming to working with the actors to building the sets and going on live action sets, and just seeing how many hundreds of people had to come together to put a vision up on screen was inspiring and such a great learning curve for me as a filmmaker.
So Will Smith, Tom Holland, Ben Mendelsohn, Rashida Jones, what were some of your favorite moments that came with working with such a talented voice cast?
All of them. Honestly, we couldn't have been luckier on this movie. They say don't meet your heroes, but on this movie that was not the case. Every single cast member we got to work with was just a pure joy. I mean, for us growing up, Will Smith was a hero. And when we got the chance to pitch in the movie, we passed out, but then after we woke back up, we got to pitch Will Smith the movie, and he really loved the comedy, the idea of turning a spy into a pigeon. He loved the idea of a big global adventure that travels the world. But the thing that he really loved, because not only is he a great actor, he's also a great storyteller, is he loved the story under the story. The idea that what the world needs is more teamwork, that we do better by bringing people together than sort of blowing them apart. And he really engaged with that, and all our actors did, but each one of them was a separate joy. Rashida's so funny and so nice. Ben Mendelsohn was fantastic. He is one of the most humble, funny people you will ever meet, until he goes into character, and then he's the most terrifying person you've ever encountered. But we had so much fun with all of our actors. They were all fantastic in their own way.
Walter, played by Tom Holland, has several wackily wonderful gadgets in this movie, so I'm curious, which one of those would you most want to have and why?
Oh, I feel like you should answer that. I like your answer better.
Your answer's great too.
Yeah.
We're a good team this way. My favorite, hands down, is the multi-pen, because when I was growing up, that pen that had all the different colors, I mean, that was the most coveted thing in any kid's pencil case. I never had one, but I would just stare longingly at my buddy who had one. And I mean, you just press a button. It was a different color. It was already a gadget in itself. And Walter took that great idea and said, well, not only is it a different color, but each color is a different gadget.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll get you out of any situation. It's the Swiss Army knife of gadgets.
Mine is the kitty glitter, because what I love about it is how weird it is. Like, glitter shoots up into the air. It's all over the place. There's little cats meowing in it. It's so strange, but what I love is, despite it being so weird, it still has some grounding in science. Like, it makes people happy. It reduces aggression. It increases the levels of serotonin, and I just love the idea that Walter would think of that instead of an actual explosion. It brings people together, then blows them apart.
Yeah. Which parts of the filmmaking process were most challenging?
You know, at Blue Sky Studios, we have 550 of the world's greatest artists and technicians, and I feel like any challenge we had, we can throw it to them, and they'd be able to solve it. It might take time, but they'd be able to figure it out. The hardest thing is always just finding the best story, right? The writing, making sure things are funny when they need to be, emotional when they need to be, making sure that you could really feel how it all makes sense and comes together in the end. And you know, even though we know the story that we want to tell, sometimes you get in there and you play it for somebody and something just doesn't work, and it really makes your mind work out, let's say. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your collaboration with Mark Ronson on the soundtrack for Spies in Disguise?
Absolutely. Music was so important for us, even when we were writing the movie. Before we had any visuals, Nick and I would make mixed tapes for each other, which you would know as a playlist. But we would find songs that inspired us, whether it was about the rhythm or the energy of a scene or just the mood and the emotion of it. And we started to find that throughout putting all that together, it really, one name kept coming up, and that was Mark Ronson. And that was really because we wanted to make Spies in Disguise a real love letter to spy movies, right? All of those spy movies we loved through the 50s, 60s, 70s. And there's just a cool style and a swagger that comes with those movies. And they all have, like, all the Bond movies have a really cool theme song.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted a really cool theme song. And so we pitched the movie to Mark, and he was so excited about it. And Mark Ronson is he's a genius at taking that throwback sound and really bringing it contemporary and current. So he put together a really amazing sort of big spy song for us for the beginning of the movie. That's a lot of fun.
This film is inspired by a short film called Pigeon Impossible. How did the concept for Spies in Disguise evolve from that short to what we see now on the big screen?
So Pigeon Impossible is about a spy who's trying to have his lunch and runs afoul of a pigeon, which is very frustrating. But of course, when you're making a full-length feature film, you're always looking for ways to make it bigger, to make the conflict bigger. So we kept thinking, what is more frustrating for a spy than having his lunch ruined by a pigeon? It's like, well, what if the spy got turned into a pigeon? That would be very frustrating. And you just start building from there. You try and build bigger and bigger stakes. And the idea, when you're putting a movie together, you're always looking, what is the thematic? What's underneath it? If you're in the world of spies, well, what's that about? I mean, the world of spying is an espionage is about trust, right? And who can you trust? Who can you not trust? And you create a character like Lance Sterling who trusts nobody. Yep. All right, well, that's really exciting. So then what do you need? Well, you need someone for him to trust or to not trust, and you come up with Walter, his gadget guy. And you start playing with all of these tropes of sort of the movie version of the spy world that you love, and that just starts to build the thematic, and you just keep going from there.
There's a long history of famous spies in the movies, so which ones were some of your greatest inspirations for the character of Lance Sterling?
Oh, man. Well, listen, there's James Bond, there's Ethan Hunt, Jason Bourne. There's so many to look at and choose from. So, but I would say those three in particular were the ones that, we grew up idolizing, wanting to be like. And so when creating Lance Sterling, we're like, how do we make a guy that stands shoulder to shoulder with those guys? And that's not an easy thing to do. So we really sat back and we just said, well, who are some of the heroes we had growing up? And the name that kept coming up was Will Smith, right? And what we loved about him was that he just has everything you want to be. He's smart, he's funny, he's super charming, right? But also, he can have an attitude. He can be a tough guy. He can be a strong guy. And it just seemed like all those things were the perfect mix to turn him into a pigeon, right? And then learn to be not just those things, but a good member of a team. Yeah.
What message do you most want viewers to take away from Spies in Disguise?
Great question. I think there's a lot of really good messages in it. I think the biggest, most important one is that we can disagree, but it's important that we find a way to work together, right? Because that's really what makes the world a better place. That's what makes the world run. That's especially in a world that doesn't work very well together.
Yeah. And then tying into that is we have this concept of the movie Team Weird, right?
Yeah.
Walter is a little bit awkward. He's a little bit different, and he's in a world that believes that when someone hits you, you hit them back harder. That's a mentality that he's up against, and he doesn't agree with that. And because he doesn't agree with that, he finds himself sort of out on his own, and he's looked at as weird. And, you know, the idea that it's good to believe in yourself, that sometimes, you know, believing yourself means stepping out of the pack, but it's usually those people who are a little bit different, who have a different way of looking at things, that have the biggest impact and make the biggest changes in the world. And the world can use more weird sometimes.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Make
you.
sure to check out Spies in Disguise on December 25th. And this is Benjamin reporting for Kids First, signing off. See you next time. Bye.
Thanks.
But then there were two.